Coming up on the Paper Talk today, we'll have another Gareth Southgate story. It's just not going away, that one, is it? Also, we'll be talking about Dan Ashworth. When is he going to come to Old Trafford? What's going on there? Plus, we'll have a couple of transfer stories as well. Let's get into it. Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, I'm outside Old Trafford and it's pretty mild, the weather. It's a bit cloudy, but there's no rain, so you might get away with not having your parkers. Loads of stories to crack on with, so we'll get into it. Make sure before we do all that, you are hitting like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We want to get to 750,000 subscribers by the end of the season, and with your support, yes, you, we can get there. Right, I want to start with a little story. There's a few stories I want to get into. Gareth Southgate, that one keeps doing the rounds. It's not going away, so we'll get into that. First of all, though, I want to talk about Mason Mount. Carl Anker in the Athletic, he's done an interesting piece, and it's more of an opinion piece and an analytical piece than a news piece, but it's worth mentioning on Mason Mount because he's looking at how he's going to fit into this Manchester United team. What's his best role? Where's his best position? Where's he played in the past? And I think Carl's broke down sort of his minutes in the Premier League since about 2018 and the positions he's played. And I think he's played something like 47% or something like that as a sort of attacking midfielder, and about 42% as a central midfielder. His main two positions seem to be as a central midfielder or an attacking midfielder. And Carl's asking the question, okay, how does that work at Manchester United? Because you've got Bruno Fernandes, you've got Kobbie Mainoo. Is it going to work if, for example, you try and shoehorn Mason Mount into a defensive midfield position alongside perhaps Kobbie Mainoo if Casemiro moves on in the summer, or if he's not available, or for whatever reason you decide to mix it up? So it's a real interesting piece, because I think this is something Erik ten Hag is going to have to look at, because Mason Mount, he's basically not featured, has he? I mean, I think he played, was it 20 minutes the other day against Liverpool? He didn't touch the ball very often, but he played his part in the win. And I just wonder, I remember watching that thinking, where's he going to fit in? How are we going to get the best out of Mason Mount? Because he's obviously a talent. There's a reason we bought him. There's a reason we didn't wait till this summer coming up to get him, where we could have got him on a free. Erik ten Hag obviously had plans for him, but we haven't really been able to see those plans because he's been injured for more or less the entire season. So it's worth having a look at that piece in the Athletic and just having a little chat about it as well. Get involved in the comments. So I think Erik ten Hag's got to work out where he sees Mason Mount playing, because I can't imagine you spent 60 million quid or whatever it was on him just to have him on the bench. He might be a rotational option, but I have the feeling that the reason we bought him and didn't wait to try and get him on a free is because he was a big player that Erik ten Hag really wanted. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits into this team now he's back from injury, and hopefully he can play his part in pushing Manchester United up the table and bringing us a bit of silverware at the end of the season in the form of the FA Cup. Another story doing the round is about Dan Ashworth. I saw this on the MUFC blog, and it comes from the iNews, and this is the idea that Newcastle are carrying on playing hardball with Manchester United, but there could be some sort of compromise in getting Dan Ashworth to Manchester United. However, one of the sort of stipulations that Newcastle are calling for, if Dan Ashworth is to come to Old Trafford, is that United don't buy any players from Newcastle or try to buy any players from Newcastle that Dan Ashworth helped to bring to St James's Park. Kind of makes sense to me that if you've employed him, he's brought these players in, you don't want them going to his new employer and buying players that he helped get for you, if that makes sense in any way, shape or form. I also look at that Newcastle squad and I think they've got some good players, but I don't think we should be picking the bones out of the Newcastle team. I think we can get Dan Ashworth in and get him to look at other players. I don't think, get him in and let's go start buying all Newcastle's best players. So that makes sense to me. I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know if that's going to be sort of enough to get that deal over the line. There was talk earlier on, wasn't there, a few weeks ago, that Newcastle actually wanted Dan Ashworth not to start Manchester United till after the transfer window closed. That made no sense for Manchester United because we want him in here for the transfer window. There was also this £20 million compensation fee that Newcastle wanted. I think Manchester United are saying that's not happening. However, it looks like there's been a bit of a compromise there and Newcastle aren't going to ask for 20 million quid. He's on gardening leave at the minute. I think Newcastle are already lining up his replacement. There's talk, I think, of Paul Mitchell going there to take over from him. So you'd expect a deal to be done there. Dan Ashworth to come here at Old Trafford. I don't think he's going to be coming in and have to wait till after the transfer window, but the idea that he cannot buy any players from Newcastle, or that United can't sign any players from Newcastle for a period of time, I'd imagine, you can't do it forever, makes sense to me. And I don't think that's too devastating, because when I look at that Newcastle squad, I think a lot of them are probably going to stay at Newcastle anyway, because they've only just signed, and there's not many of them, I mean there's a few, that actually take at Old Trafford. So Hopefully we can get that deal done sooner rather than later, and he can come in and he can start moving the club forward and getting these transfer deals done, working with Omar Barada and maybe, hopefully I should say, Erik ten Hag as well, to get the right transfers in. Just on Erik ten Hag's future, the Gareth Southgate rumours aren't going away. There's still lots of reports and news stories doing the rounds that Gareth Southgate is being lined up by Ineos to take over from Erik ten Hag. We've seen these stories doing the rounds for the last couple of days. Now there's a story doing the rounds this morning, and it seems it's based on an interview that Gareth Southgate did a few weeks ago. I think the Express have picked up on it. Not a few weeks ago, sorry, a few years ago with the Players Tribune. Now, while he was talking to the Players Tribune, Gareth Southgate said when he was a kid, he was a big Manchester United fan. He said he loved Brian Robson, and he said he had two ambitions as a kid. One was to play for England, and one was to play for Manchester United. And he did one, he played for England. Now, people have looked at that and gone, well, he loves United, he wants to beat United. That means he wants to be Manchester United manager. I mean, it is, you can look at that as a bit of a hint. If someone was a United fan growing up, you'd imagine that if he didn't get to play for United, they'd like to manage the club. However, I don't think that's the be-all and end-all. I think a big part of whether Gareth Southgate is going to come to United is if he's offered the job. I think that's the main sort of question here. Is Gareth Southgate going to be offered the job by Ineos, by Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Now, there were reports that even if Erik ten Hag wins the FA Cup and gets Champions League football, Ineos still want Gareth Southgate, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. If Erik ten Hag gets you back-to-back trophies and back-to-back Champions League finishes, you cannot get rid of him. That is insane, especially not for a manager whose only Premier League experience was getting Middlesbrough relegated. However, there's a little bit of, momentum behind these rumours, and it worries me a lot because I'm not a big Gareth Southgate fan. I said this yesterday. I think he's done a decent job with England. I don't think he's cut out for managing Manchester United. I don't think he's the guy to take us back to the top of the Premier League. And I think given the right backing, Erik ten Hag might be. I prefer Erik ten Hag to Gareth Southgate. So we'll have to wait and see what's happening on that front. But people now are digging out old interviews, digging out other stories and saying, look, this means that, and look, this could mean that Gareth Southgate's going to come to Manchester United. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I think a lot would help if Sir Jim Ratcliffe or someone from Ineos came out and said, Erik ten Hag's our guy, he's going to be here next season. But so far, they haven't done that. We've had these little hints. Sir Jim Ratcliffe saying that, Arsenal were patient with Arteta. Sir Jim Ratcliffe mentioning the fact that you can't just blame the manager when you look at the last 11 years, how everything's gone wrong. There's obviously something wrong with the structure. But he hasn't come out and emphatically backed the manager. So we don't know what's going to happen there. He might be waiting to see. He might wait and see if the club is successful this season. When I say successful, if we win a trophy, if we get into the Champions League, is that going to be enough to keep Erik ten Hag in his job? Hopefully it will be. We'll have to wait and see though, because at the moment there's nothing sort of concrete on Erik ten Hag's future, and these Gareth Southgate rumours keep getting a little bit of momentum. Also, I saw a story in the Daily Mail, which does affect United. It's about Chelsea and Manchester City in FFP. When the recent decision came down to dock Nottingham Forest, I think they lost 4 points, was it? I think they're in their battle against relegation for breaching FFP. One of the sort of comments that was made by the panel that looked at it was that expulsion from the Premier League is an option. That can be an option if you have got severe or major breaches of the rules. So the Mail are looking at this and going, well, Chelsea and Manchester City could have breached the rules in a major way. City obviously facing these 115 charges. Could that mean that expulsion from the Premier League could happen for Manchester City? Potentially. We just don't know, do we? Let's be honest. We don't know if they're going to get found guilty on all these charges. We don't know if they're going to get found guilty on any of them. We don't know what the punishment's going to be. We don't know the severity of the punishment. Now, it looks like, I think it's penciled in that next January, they're going to have some sort of, that's when it's going to have the hearing, when it's going to be looked at. We expect the end of next season where we may have a decision. So there's still a long way to go with this. And there might be some shenanigans and sort of, dealings before that. We just don't know. It might be a fine, it might be points, it might be expulsion from the Premier League. I mean, the dream wish is that City get all the trophies took off them and they dish them out to other clubs, but I don't think that's going to happen, if we're being brutally honest. I wouldn't be surprised if it was just a fine and a slap on the wrist. But we'll have to wait and see. However, the Mail are sort of pointing out the fact that expulsion from the Premier League could be an option, not just for Manchester City, but even for Chelsea. Chelsea, it seemed, sailed pretty close to the wind, didn't they, with some of the transfers they were making. They sort of had these loopholes where they were putting players on 8-year contracts and all the rest of it to try and get round FFP. I don't know how successful that's been. It's been a bit of a bin fire, hasn't it, at Chelsea under Todd Burley. So we'll have to wait and see whether they're going to get any repercussions. And if Chelsea and City are punished severely, that could help Manchester United, because there's two clubs that you'd expect to be challenging at the top of the table next season. I know Chelsea haven't been there this season, they've been a bit of a mess, but sooner or later I do expect them to get their act together, and City are always at the top of the table nowadays, unfortunately. Just one final story as well in the Evening Standard, and it's the Fulham defender Tosin Adarabioyo. if I've got that one right. I'm trying to pronounce his name right. He's a 26-year-old. He's out of contract in the summer. Been linked loosely with Manchester United, but apparently he's going to sign a new deal, or Fulham are going to offer him a new deal. That's according to the Evening Standard. Decent player. We were talking about him on the Paddock Live last night. If we could get him on a free, why not? He could be a decent backup option, but it looks like Fulham are going to pull out the stops to keep him at Craven Cottage for the foreseeable future. Going to be back later on with myself, Joe Smith, and Andy Tate, the legend that is Andy Tate, on Off the Bar. So make sure you are hitting like, share, and subscribe. I've been Jay Motty. This has been the Paper Talk outside a pretty breezy Old Trafford. Thanks for watching.